The private room of the steakhouse was dressed for celebration, but the smiles around the long table were brittle as glass.
Robert, we've found the perfect place for you. Sunset Hills Assisted Living. You'll be much happier there, and we'll sell the house.
It's the practical choice, Dad. You'll have round-the-clock care.
No, you can't send Grandpa away. Please, Dad, don't do this.
Robert's weathered hand came to rest on a slim leather folder, the gesture deliberate and slow.
Don't make this harder than it has to be, Robert. We've already made the arrangements.
I'll run away. I'll live with Grandpa.
Jennifer, you're making a very large mistake.
The entire table froze. Even the clinking of silverware from other diners seemed to pause as every eye swiveled toward the head of the table. Robert's thumb traced the edge of the folder, his jaw set. Whatever lay inside, it was about to rewrite the rules of this family. The morning sun spilled through the kitchen window of Robert Kincaid's modest Phoenix bungalow. Emma looked up from her math workbook as Robert set down a glass of milk, his face crinkling into a smile. Alone in the kitchen, Robert paused before a photograph of his late wife, his chest tightening with a familiar ache. The piece shattered when Jennifer's black SUV rolled to a stop in the driveway, doors slamming before the engine cut.
Robert, we've been talking. It's time to consider a simpler arrangement. This house is too much for you.
Dad, it just isn't practical anymore. You'll see.
Emma flew across the room and wrapped her arms around Robert's leg, her small body trembling.
It's okay, sweetheart. No one's going anywhere.
Don't fill her head with false promises. The decision's been made.
Robert had known, even before the birthday dinner, that the quiet life he'd built for Emma was under siege. Robert pushed his chair back and stood, excusing himself with a nod. The leather folder remained on the table, a silent threat.
Off to call a real estate agent already? Good. The sooner we list the house, the better.
In the restroom, Robert pulled out his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart.
Catherine, it's Robert. The moment has arrived. Bring the second folder to the private room at Gallagher's.
I'm already on my way. I'll be there in 15 minutes.
He ended the call and studied his own reflection. The man in the mirror had faced worse than a greedy daughter-in-law. When Robert returned to the table, Jennifer was mid-sentence, her voice dripping with satisfaction.
I've taken the liberty of contacting a property manager. Your house will be on the market by Monday.
Is that so?
The room grew quiet again, the air charged with something none of them could name. 2 months earlier, Robert had sat in a Stark medical office, the word aggressive still echoing in his ears.
Stage 2. They can treat it, but the cost, Emma. I have to protect her.
He made no phone calls, told no one. Instead, he drove straight to the office of Catherine Hale, the attorney he hadn't seen in a decade.
Robert, it's been too long. Are you finally ready to update that will?
Not just update. I need to change everything. Emma is the only thing that matters now.
Catherine studied a recent photo of Emma that Robert slid across the desk, the child's trusting eyes a silent plea.
Michael and Jennifer see you as an obstacle. We'll need irrefutable evidence of their intentions.
I've been recording conversations. They think I'm just a forgetful old man. Let them.
For 6 months, Catherine orchestrated every move, building a legal fortress around a 9-year-old girl. And at the center of it all was a document that would be known only as the second folder. In the hushed quiet of Catherine's office, Robert turned to a tabbed folder labeled simply William.
Your brother's industrial patent royalties. You've kept this quiet for years.
After William passed, I discovered the royalties were worth a fortune. I never told Michael.
Catherine slid a draft of the new trust across the desk, the numbers on the page enough to silence any skeptic.
It has to be a trap. They need to incriminate themselves publicly. My birthday dinner will be the stage.
I'll have the waiter wired with a discreet mic. Every word from Jennifer's mouth will be preserved.
The trust was bound by conditions Michael and Jennifer could never fulfill, terms that would strip them of any claim.
When I slide that folder across the table, their whole world will collapse.
The plan was meticulous, forged over months of patience. All that remained was the trigger. Now, Hours later, Robert sat at his birthday dinner, his hand resting on the second folder. The engine was already in motion. The restaurant door swung open and Catherine Hale stepped inside, briefcase in hand, her expression unreadable.
Oh, look, Robert called his lawyer. What's she going to do? Serve us a complaint over the appetizers?
Have a seat, Catherine. You're just in time.
Catherine set the leather folder on the tablecloth and opened it with deliberate calm, her movements drawing every eye.
What is this? A courtroom. We're celebrating a birthday, not reading a will.
Actually, Mrs. Kincaid, that is precisely what we are about to do.
Uncle Richard dropped his fork, his ruddy face turning a shade paler. Aunt Patricia fumbled for her napkin, her eyes wide as she whispered something to her husband. The mockery at the table curdled into uncertainty, the earlier arrogance cracking like thin ice.
Robert Kincaid has revised his last will and testament. I suggest you listen carefully.
Catherine's voice cut through the silence, crisp and unwavering, as she began reading the preamble of the new will.
Get to the point. How much is he leaving us? A few $1,000s from that dusty house.
Mrs. Kincaid, the total value of the estate is substantially more than the modest bungalow you anticipated.
Michael's face went slack, his earlier nod of agreement now a ghost haunting his expression.
Substantially? What does that mean?
It means that your plans for Sunset Hills are no longer relevant. The estate is considerable.
Uncle Richard sputtered into his wine, the red liquid sloshing as his joviality evaporated. Aunt Patricia clutched her husband's arm, her lips moving in a silent prayer of disbelief. The arrogance drained from Jennifer's face, replaced by a cold, calculating dread. Robert remained motionless, the leather folder still beneath his hand, a slight curve to his lips, the only sign of satisfaction.
Furthermore, the primary beneficiary of the revised will is not Michael Kincaid, nor his spouse.
That's impossible. Who else could it be? You're a lonely old man with no one left.
Jen, calm down. Let's just hear this out.
Jennifer's knuckles whitened as she gripped the table edge, the spill spreading like a bloodstain beside her plate. Robert met Jennifer's glare with a disquieting calm, like a man watching a storm from safe harbor.
The bulk of the estate will be held in a trust. I will read the terms now.
Emma inched closer to her grandfather, her small fingers finding the fabric of his sleeve. Michael pressed a trembling hand to his forehead, the weight of the coming revelation suffocating. Aunt Patricia stopped breathing for a full beat, her napkin pressed to her lips as the room hung on Catherine's next word.
The trust beneficiary is Emma Grace Kincaid. The trust is funded with $11 million from patent royalties.
The number 11 million hung in the air, a sum so vast it seemed to mock Jennifer's brochure.
11 million? You've been hiding this all along? And you're giving it to a child who can't even manage an allowance?
The terms are clear. Emma is to reside with Robert. Any other arrangement would violate the trust.
Emma's tear-streaked face tilted upward, her eyes locking with her grandfather's. A tiny spark of hope flickered there.
You can't do this. I'll sue. I'll overturn it. Michael, back me up here.
Michael sat paralyzed, his mouth opening and closing, the weight of his choices crashing down.
No, Jennifer, you'll do nothing. The recordings have already been submitted to the court.
Custody proceedings are underway. Mrs. Kincaid's own words have sealed her fate.
Emma's small hand slid into Robert's, and he gave it the gentlest squeeze, a silent promise. Catherine reached into her briefcase and produced a small digital recorder, its indicator light glowing steady. The waiter, still standing near the sideboard, shifted uncomfortably, the hidden microphone on his collar now obvious to all.
Listen. This conversation occurred less than an hour ago, right here in this room.
The recorder crackled, and Jennifer's voice spilled out, dripping with contempt.
Once Robert's in Sunset Hills, we sell the house. He's disposable now. Then we finally get what we deserve.
Michael's head dropped into his hands, a choked sob escaping as the recording laid bare their betrayal.
Based on this evidence, an emergency custody petition has been filed. Mrs. Kincaid, you are formally served.
Dad, please, I'm begging you. I didn't know she'd take it this far. We can fix this.
You knew, Michael. You nodded when she called me disposable. This is what you chose.
Robert's hand closed over the leather folder. The gesture quiet but absolute. The conversation was over.
Michael, I gave you every cent of your grandparents' inheritance. Everything I had went into your future. And you repaid me by standing silent while your wife planned to throw me into a nursing home like garbage.
Michael's shoulders shook, his face a ruin of tears. He couldn't meet his father's gaze any longer.
And you, Jennifer, you called me disposable. You underestimated the wrong old man.
Catherine passed him a heavy fountain pen, her movements deliberate and without ceremony. Robert uncapped the pen and signed his name with a final, slashing stroke. The document was sealed. The ink gleamed under the warm light. Robert Kincaid, unmistakable and irrevocable. Jennifer's mascara ran in dark streaks, her composure shattered beyond repair.
This birthday, I'm giving myself the only gift that matters, my granddaughter's safety.
The leather folder lay closed again, but its contents had already rewritten every future at that table. Robert rose from his chair, his movements unhurried, as if he had all the time in the world.
Robert said evenly, "Bring me the check for the entire table, please."
The waiter arrived with a leather folio, his hands trembling. Without looking at the total, Robert counted out a thick stack of hundreds and pressed them inside.
He slid the cash into the folio. "The meal is covered. Consider it my parting gift."
Emma looked up at him, her tears dried, her small hand tightening around his.
Robert smiled down at her, his voice gentle. "Ready to go home, sweetheart? Our home."
And he led her past the stunned family, past the overturned wine glass and the dark stain on the linen, toward the door. Jennifer's designer purse toppled from the table as she slumped back, her rage spent. Michael's broken call echoed behind them, but Robert kept walking, his hand never leaving Emma's. The door swung open, and the cool night air swallowed their footsteps. As the door clicked shut, Jennifer erupted from her seat like a wild animal.
You can't leave. Catherine, you witch! This is all your fault!
She lunged across the table, fingers clawing for the leather briefcase.
Catherine sidestepped smoothly, not a paper out of place. Your daughter-in-law's actions speak for themselves, Mrs. Kincaid.
Michael had slumped to the floor, his shoulders heaving, the fight drained from him completely. Uncle Richard stared, his ruddy face now ash-white, while Aunt Patricia crossed herself.
"What have you done, Jennifer? You've destroyed this family."
The weight of the room turned on Jennifer, a dozen accusing eyes cutting away her last shred of dignity.
Catherine snapped her briefcase shut. The court will handle the rest. Good evening.
And then she was gone, leaving only the ruins of a birthday dinner and a family shattered beyond recognition. The parking lot was cool and quiet, the restaurant's golden glow shrinking behind them. Robert walked Emma to the passenger door of his old sedan.
Grandpa, do I have to go back to Mom's house? I don't want to.
He knelt to her level, his voice steady. "No, Emma, you're staying with me. The new papers say so."
She threw her arms around him, sobbing not with grief but with relief. He strapped her safely into the seat, then rounded the car and slid behind the wheel. The engine turned over with a familiar grind, and the sedan pulled away, its taillights fading into the Phoenix night. The following morning, the scandal dominated the front page. Birthday betrayal costs couple $11 million inheritance. The article detailed Jennifer's recorded abuse and the hidden trust, sparking a firestorm of public outrage. Jennifer's social standing vanished overnight, her name now synonymous with greed and cruelty. Jennifer's phone buzzed without pause. Her feeds had turned into a cascade of fury. A letter arrived that afternoon. Her largest sponsorship deal terminated, effective immediately. Michael taped a single box shut, the last remnant of a marriage and a business now in ashes. He lowered himself onto a folding chair, stared at the blank wall, and did not move for hours. The real estate firm's storefront stood dark. A notice hung in the window, permanently closed. Robert's mailbox held a formal notification, a custody hearing set for Tuesday. 9 a.m. sharp. Catherine's email was terse. The evidence is overwhelming. You need not attend. It will be over in minutes. The newspaper printed a follow-up. Judge fast-tracks Kincaid custody case. At the bungalow, Emma set her school bag by the door and drew a picture of a small house with 2 stick figures. Robert watched from the doorway, the faintest smile crossing his face. They had made it through. The bungalow was quiet, the only sound the scratch of Emma's pencil on her math worksheet.
Robert set a plate of apple slices beside her. Fuel for the brain.
Emma pushed her finished homework aside and reached for her crayons, a determined look on her face. She drew 2 figures, a tall one with silver hair and a smaller one with a braid, and wrote the words "My Hero" above them.
She held it up. Grandpa, this is for you.
Robert took the drawing, his eyes lingering on the words. He walked to the fridge and pinned it up with a magnet. The drawing hung there, a splash of color against the white appliance, a testament to a new beginning. He returned to the table and sat beside her, the 2 of them in the soft afternoon light. No tense silence, no hidden agenda, just a grandfather and his granddaughter, finally safe. Emma's school bag waited by the door, ready for a future that no longer held any fear. Robert paused before the mantelpiece, where a framed photograph of his late wife stood beside a single fresh daisy. Later, at the park, he and Emma walked hand in hand to a quiet spot beneath a cottonwood tree.
Grandma used to bring us here every Sunday. She said this tree could listen.
Do you think Grandma would be proud of us?
He knelt beside her. Emma, she would be more than proud. She would be at peace, knowing you're safe.
Emma hugged him fiercely, burying her face in his shoulder. When they stood, he pulled a simple red kite from their bag and handed her the string.
Your grandmother loved this kite. Let's send it up for her today.
The red diamond soared against the endless blue tail twisting in the breeze. Emma laughed, a pure sound that seemed to lift with the kite, and Robert felt something loosen in his own chest. Across town, Michael sat alone in his dim apartment, the silence pressing in. He opened a small box and pulled out a worn photograph, its edges curled with age. The image showed a younger version of himself standing between Robert and his late mother, all 3 smiling.
Where did it all go wrong?
He traced his mother's face with a trembling finger, the weight of his betrayal crashing down. Outside, the world had moved on without him, leaving only the echo of his choices. He set the photo down and buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. There was no one to hear him, no one to absolve him. He had chosen silence, and now silence was all he had. Some absences, he realized, can never be filled. The courtroom was bright and cold, the fluorescent lights stripping the defiance from Jennifer Kincaid's face. She stood at the defendant's table, her expensive clothes replaced by a plain state-issued dress. The judge's voice was a dull monotone, recounting the charges of elder abuse and fraud. Jennifer's chin lifted once, a last flash of her old pride, but it died before reaching her eyes. The gavel struck the sounding block, a sharp crack that sealed her fate. The word guilty glowed on the electronic display, a permanent record of her downfall. She did not weep. She did not scream. She simply stood there, hollowed out. The bailiff stepped forward, and Jennifer's hands were cuffed behind her back. As they led her away, she turned her head, looking back at the empty rows, but no one had come. The heavy door closed, and the courtroom fell silent, justice finally complete. A familiar car pulled up to the bungalow, and Catherine Hale stepped out, her briefcase left behind for once.
Robert opened the door before she could knock. Catherine, I thought lawyers billed by the hour, not over tea.
She chuckled. This one's on the house. Consider it a closing gift.
Inside, Emma offered Catherine a cookie from a fresh-baked batch before disappearing into the living room with her sketchbook. They settled at the kitchen table with steaming mugs, the tension of the past months a distant memory.
The appeals have been dismissed. The trust is ironclad. Emma's future is secure, Robert. You won.
He stared into his tea for a long moment. We won the moment she wasn't afraid anymore.
His gaze drifted to the framed photograph on the mantelpiece, the fresh daisy still vibrant beside it.
You did right by her, Robert. All of them.
The quiet click of her teacup on the saucer was the only sound needed. The long fight was over. In the days that followed, the bungalow filled with the simple rhythms of a life reclaimed. The red kite rose above the cottonwoods, a speck of defiance against the endless sky. Robert knelt in the backyard earth, Emma's small hands beside his, pressing a sapling into the soil. The sapling was barely a twig, but it would grow, rooted in a future no one could steal. Inside, he hung the page that had changed everything. His last will, framed beside a crayon drawing of two stick figures. One represented the law, the other love. Both protected the same heart. Robert closed the leather folder one last time, the sound as final as a gavel. The money was never the legacy. The legacy was the morning sunlight, Emma's laugh, the quiet certainty that he had stood between her and the dark. He had not been a rich man in the eyes of the world, but he had given her the only inheritance that mattered, unwavering love. And in the end, that was enough. It was always enough. The crayon drawing held fast to the refrigerator door, its bright colors unfaded. As dusk settled, Robert pulled a thin book from the shelf and lowered himself onto the sofa. Emma curled up beside him, her head finding the familiar crook of his shoulder. His voice, soft as worn leather, unraveled a tale of distant lands and brave hearts. The lamp bathed them in amber, a cocoon of warmth against the gathering night. Outside, the world had long since decided its verdicts, but inside these walls only peace remained. The leather folder sat undisturbed on the shelf, a quiet sentinel that had served its purpose. The camera pulled back slowly, the room receding until it was a single glowing window in the dark. And the story of Robert Kincaid, like all true stories, did not end with a fortune or a courtroom. It ended with a choice repeated every morning to love with a steady, undivided heart.